So let me start by saying thanks to Omar for having me here at short notice and for keeping me awake all night, putting this presentation together. I also look forward to discussions thereafter, maybe not only today, but even as and when questions come up. It gives me great pleasure to see that we are all sitting here together and discussing the future of Auroville and sitting together and trying to understand architectural concepts and urban visions. So with that, I would like to use the opportunity to share with you some of the urban design principles that are embedded in Auroville's city plan. I would like to lay the emphasis on the word will in Auroville. So a lot of, I've heard over the years, and since I've been involved since 1990, which is over 30 years ago. So I think there is perhaps a lack of information about the work that had been ongoing in Roger's office, perhaps, and discussions that took place between him and the mother and between him and others who were involved in designing details. So I've put together some of the key points for you to share with you a little bit what we have been doing regarding urban design. So, like, I have often seen that the galaxy plan's image, that it is so widely circulated that it often results in the galaxy plan being understood by some people just as a logo almost. But indeed, it was a city plan. And unlike most cities where people often present city models with road structures and plots, Auroville was much more advanced as a design. It included urban design and it included building masses. Such a plan could not have been possible without detailed definitions of buildings and green spaces. These were not just conceptual that many people think. They were calculated. All the densities were calculated. The per person habitation of 30 square meter was laid down. Various collective facilities were planned and located. It was all very systematic and planned. I want to recall, I want you to sort of try to study the model that everybody knows in a three-dimensional manner. And if you look at it from this shot, you'll realize that all these building volumes, building edges, densities, building heights, everything was defined, and that the model itself was a result of detailed calculations that were made not on the basis of typical city planning assumptions, but based on detailed discussions between Roger and the mother about what the aim of Auroville was, why it had to be a city, and what can begin, what kind of adventure can begin once we actually have this type of a city. So the aim was to envision a very different kind of city than conventional cities, and therefore a lot of complexity had to be worked out in great detail beyond roads and streets and plots. I would like to quote here the way the city plan is understood in the architectural world. I'm quoting Madhavi and Nikki Desai, who are based in Ahmedabad, and John Lang, who together produced the most important book, I would say, Architecture and Independence, A Search for Identity, India 1880 to 1980. They quote Auroville as the exemplar of rationalist urban design thought in India, which has no formal debt to Le Corbusier. So the fact that it was a rational urban design that led to, was innovative in the context of innovation in city planning, This was a recognized fact right in the beginning. And in fact, you will be happy to know that Auroville is going to be shown in MoMA in a few months. And exactly for this reason, it's in the context of non-colonial approach to city planning in the South countries. I want to also, for some people who question, perhaps because of the haphazard way in which Auroville happened to develop over the last 53 years, despite having such a strong plan, I would like to summarize that Auroville was always seen as a city. It was always referred to in all the quotes and brochures that were produced in the time that the mother was there, an ideal city for an ideal society, the city the earth needs, the city of dawn. So, it has to be urban in character. On the other hand, Auroville was also seen as a model city in India and for the world. So India, if you look at the Indian context, India cannot afford to get its urbanization wrong. We know what is the cost of sprawling, and we know all of us will recall Mother's quote about Auroville being located in India. India has become the symbolic representation of all the difficulties in present-day humanity. India will be the site of its resurrection, the resurrection of a higher and truer life. Every day there are articles about India and urbanization and haphazardness. See, the thing is that let's just realize what Auroville will have to be in order to be a model city in India. India has 1/6 of the global population, occupying only 2.4% of the world's land. So India has a population that is enormous to its land availability. And if you sprawl, not only are we going to spread, see the traffic jams now in Pondi and even in Auroville. The fact that we will need individual or public vehicles or public transport, but in any case, this type of sprawling is something we cannot afford. From the time the Auroville plan was conceived in 1965, we have tripled our population. So can you imagine all the more how much we have to be compact in order to still be a relevant model for India? So this is something really, really to understand before I explain some of the urban design issues. This was because maybe people are not aware of this, but Roger's office was given this type of a detailed brief. And that's why the figures that they calculated and the density had to do with that kind of aim that was set for Auroville, to be a model city in the context of India. You can see how how compact India is, even in the low density areas that in former times, this is, we are living in a very luxurious situation with so much land around us, but actually the land that we are stewarding right now was meant to develop a city that is not less compact. We know that, what the common man faces and how cities in India are unlivable. Auroville has, right from the beginning, chosen to address all these issues in a holistic way, to radically rethink mobility, density, but always keeping human scale in mind, even though it's a compact city, negotiating high rise with low rise, high tech with low tech, and all kinds of complex infrastructure questions. All of that has been synthesized in this urban plan. So I personally have the opinion that if what we build is not urban, it's not Auroville, because it's very important that to remember that quote in which we were expected to begin with a model town and end with a perfect world. I mean, of course, there is a utopian aspect, but on the other hand, the looking upon Auroville as utopia makes us sometimes feel that it's never going to be achieved. So I would rather remind us also that Auroville was, for me, I mean, the way I understand it, more than utopia, it is a laboratory. So the importance is the important thing is to experiment. And to experiment means to try out things that we were not tried out before. We are not actually here to repeat what we know has happened everywhere else. And it will, if we don't proactively go the planned way, then we are repeating already in a virgin land that we had the opportunity to build a city upon. We have already put our own organic growth and scattered development in a manner that we may be standing in our own way today. So I would like to clarify some myths versus facts, because a lot of, in Auroville, maybe there is a notion that organic growth is preferred. Maybe the new residents who come in the last decade or so may not, I don't know, perhaps they know it. I'm just going to put it out there because there are myths that I keep hearing about how Auroville was planned to be. And I, having worked with the archive of Roger, I have got to understand that many of the basic essentials are perhaps either not understood, or we may even be in collective denial about that. It would be in any case good to discuss some of these issues. I'm going to refer to only one report to make it simple for today's presentation. I'm referring to the 1965 report that Roger Anger's office produced and the 1968 master plan, which was presented by Roger on the basis of the report he made in 65. So it was a 3-year-long intensive work with daily interaction with the mother. And on the 1965 report, the mother had written hand notes. I would suggest all those who don't want to go through the lengthy archive should at least see this one report. It will be so revealing for us. So first and foremost, it was a vision-driven planned city. It is meant to still be that. And it was not it was not primarily supporting organic growth. It was the top-down approach, may look authoritative to some people, but the bottoms-up without the top-down could be very much of a high risk. We could be risking the whole vision if we do not merge the bottoms-up with awareness of the top down and see how a true collaboration could happen. I always think of the Sri Aurobindo's symbol and the Matri Mandir design, where the earth opens up to receive the vision, and the top down, the vision heads downwards, so that there's a top down and a bottoms up that could actually merge in a perfect collaboration. And that is the way to manifest things in any case. The driver of this urban, the driver for the way Auroville ought to develop is the vision of the future and the mission, rather than references from past cities. And therefore, in a lot of work that was done in Roger Anger's office, they relied a lot on imagination, not only on past knowledge, because the future cannot be predicted. It can only be enabled. And I think imagination is a very, very important human attribute that one can build on, rather than past knowledge, which will fall short for our future, given our population expansion. What are the unique features of Auroville? What makes Auroville unique? In Roger Anger's own words, what makes Auroville different from other cities is its program, its aim, and its role. And also to recognize that ordinary towns do not propose anything other than individual needs and exclusive materialism. This is like a pitfall that we might want to avoid if we consider that the aim of Auroville and why people who come to Auroville and to build this city would need, somehow are being asked to go beyond their personal preferences and their individual needs, although those will be also covered. Still, the larger aim is important. Roger Anger's collaborator, Mario Eman, in 1966, he compared ancient cities with the future approach for Auroville's development. He said the unity of ancient cities was assured by materials, tradition, and ignorance of other styles. That means people built in a similar manner and it was automatically coherent when there was organic growth. But given the diversity that will be needed for Auroville, people coming from all the different countries and all their different ways of living, this will have to be harmonized by the application of simple guidelines coordinated by urbanists and the collaboration by architects in order to prevent the chaos of suburbs that you see everywhere. This is also something to bear in mind as we go forward. As a result, Roger explained that for him, primarily, it is a people-centric city where the human scale has to be conserved and not be lost in infrastructure and machine scale of, given that there is such a high density demand. So for a number of years, he said, he has devoted himself to an architecture concerned with man as a social being. So he was trying, if you look at Discover, the Galaxy Plans model, you'll realize all the social spaces. If you don't imagine this to be a car-dominated city, then you will discover the intimacy and the opportunity for social interaction. That was very, very important for Roger. Auroville will attempt the rehabilitation of streets. That means going from road towards street, a change from rushways to a satisfying and happy system of circulation, from meeting place to meeting place, squares, fountains, gardens, pools, staircases, wings of shade, sudden shafts of sunlight. For mobility, so now what I'm mentioning here are all, here going forward, are issues quoting only that one document of the 1965 report. Right at the beginning, from the very beginning, Roger had asked the question, shall we allow the presence of cars? And he had written, the reign of cars has conditioned the urbanism of the 20th century and continues to tyrannize it. Therefore, the option to follow is to suppress this usage within the town. At that time, nobody was really talking about the car receding. In fact, Le Corbusier had planned Chandigarh for the car. And so there was a different kind of Brasilia and other places around that same time were conceived in a very, very different manner, car-centric, as opposed to Auroville's plan. And that's the main distinction between Auroville's urban design and those other cities that were being generated at the time. And perhaps why Auroville was misunderstood also as a design. The other unique aspect is that we are beyond land ownership. What this means is that the urban design of Auroville is unique in that urban design guidelines and setbacks are not defined by individual plot definitions based on separate ownerships. So all the DDPs will have to find another way of defining urban building guidelines, given that the basis itself is different. On the contrary, it allows a new urban experiment through a new basis, and it's a great opportunity for continuity and connectedness and a sense of unity throughout the city. Auroville's aim was to achieve human unity, and the design of the whole city also contained a sense of synthesis of everything, despite 4 different zones, despite all this complex program. The sense of unity is manifested through the design of the city. Regarding the location between the main roads, he had asked, in order to avoid them and yet at the same time best benefiting from both. So Auroville was always located between the 2 roads. He explained why, because they wanted to be near enough to be connected, but far enough for the city center to be still and quiet. And you see the green belt is also there to protect that. But I will come to the green belt in a minute. Auroville, why? Because in the near future, they will become heavy traffic roads, and the coming into existence of Auroville will inevitably speed up the process. So Roger's team already predicted exactly what is happening because it was already planned, and it was known that Auroville's growth will create even more traffic. Furthermore, in the specific case of Auroville, its center must be as far as possible from all major axes of circulation due to the presence of the Mother's Pavilion in the Park of Unity. Later, it was what we know as Matri Mandir. The population of 50,000, many people also question the population and they think it could be anything. There are many theories I have heard or rumors. But in fact, if you look at the whole conversations, the population of 50,000 was set, even though Roger wanted to sprawl a bit more than he finally did, because the mother wanted it to be compact. But 50,000 was decided as the critical mass necessary to conduct all aspects of experiments and innovations that are foreseen as an integral part of Auroville's purpose, education, economy, etc. So this quote that I feel is also quite relevant when people talk to the mother about not growing until we have more clarity. The mother said, now there are 30 of you. It is difficult, isn't it? When there are 30,000 of you, it will be much easier. There will be many more possibilities. Regarding zones and mixed use, mother's sketch, in fact, the word zones was not really used at the time. And I think later, post-industrial zoning criticism, which was meant for very large cities, have been sometimes used to smear sort of, or to sort of have led to some misunderstanding about zoning and its irrelevance. The thing is that Auroville's plan, through this rotation and through the spiraling that Roger introduced into this kind of a sketch that the mother gave him for 4 different sections, this kind of approach was done by Roger's office to increase the mixed use. And through this rotation, you will see in the city center, it's like a melting pot. It's like when you stir your coffee, you'll see all those lines, they become radial and they become cohesive. So the city center is just one melting pot of all those 4 zones which radiate into it. You will notice that the spiraling movement was introduced at a later stage. There has been grid, geometry explorations in a rectangular plan. Then it came down to a radial one. And then because Roger wanted to experiment with mixed densities to enable low density, he created also high rise, which you see in the macro model in the lower left. And then you'll see how it compares and what it really does. So the rotation is not because of some fetish towards imitating some form, or, like many people say, it is some kind of a holy geometry from copying the galaxy. Well, this originally came through a process of rational steps, but also, of course, there's always an irrational inspiration that also enters and works simultaneously. In any case, the zones in Auroville are there, but in each zone there is mixed use defined. To what extent? So the word galaxy and the urban form was, like I said, the result of urban design and rational considerations rather than mere imposition of the galactic shape and form for decorative or nostalgic reasons. If you study some of the process work, you will understand the degrees of, like, the amount of rigorous work that took place here to define those roads, the streets, the character and the urban massing, in order to allow a rich variety of densities, rather than cities like Berlin and Paris, where all the buildings are 5-story, or in Madrid, 8-story. It was to allow different experiments in Auroville and yet achieve the density. Also, what is important to understand, that unlike other cities, we have 2 important poles of development: the international zone and the cultural zone. So the industrial zone, which in fact was called the economic zone, actually it is not. It was for us, our residents, to go and work. It was not primarily seen, the word industrial zone came much later, but it was called the economic zone in the plan. So the residences and the economy are, they have a very close relationship, and you can go through the city center quickly, walk through and reach the other side. And the two zones which are very busy are interspersed with two other park-like zones. One is the cultural zone and one is the international zone. So it was very important for me, this diagram in the master plan that explains that there are three poles of development. One is the inner development, Matri Mandir, and for the outer development, because we are not actually here to focus on our individual needs. So housing and our workspaces were existing, but two broad zones were conceived where our development had to be focused on in order to attract the right people for Auroville's aim. So the cultural zone was meant to be a place where we ourselves could work on our inner culture and develop our inner task from the children from the little kindergartens until the larger buildings we need and social infrastructure we need to develop our own culture that's located there. And all the researches from other countries, from everywhere in the world that are useful for human unity are to be invited. So that is the international zone. So Auroville has a very big role to play in attracting interaction from the rest of the world. And the inner research is focused in the cultural zone. The external research is brought in through the international zone, melt and intersect in Siru. Siru is that point, very important, where this social research will be located. And Matri Mandir will be the central pole of our cohesive force, that is the soul of our city. Regarding climate, runoff of water, etc., also already for those who are concerned about sustainability, they will find that in the 65 plan, there's a general layout. It was mentioned that in the general layout of Auroville, the climatic data was of primary importance. In particular, the southeast direction of the prevailing winds. They must determine the orientation of the overall plan, or at least that of the buildings. To respect this is an essential factor for comfort and well-being and will impact the architecture as well. Furthermore, the capital problem of drainage prevents from formulating any substantial option regarding the location before undertaking an extremely complex study of a large area of the land to the southwest. So a lot of people feel that there was no data at that time, but on the contrary, a lot of work was done to get the essential data to conceive of an artificial lake in the center and so on. And the things that were not known were left open to be discovered later in consultation with the mother. Mobility. So, sorry, I have already spoken about this, but what is important is in the report, when Roger asked, the whole paragraph is here to understand the mother's response. The mobility principle of Auroville must be defined right now. Shall we allow the presence of cars? Probably in just a few years, India will know, same as Europe and the US, the major urban problem the automobile is. The reign of cars, I've said this, so I'm not going to repeat. I'll just jump to this other part. Although outdated and everybody knows it, still the automobile strives at its best to create hell inside the cities and kill the outskirts. Therefore, the option to follow is to forbid and suppress the usage of this means of transportation within the town and replace it by another, more hygienic, less cumbersome and noisy, more aesthetic, maybe newer if possible. The mother had answered on the same note with a note, small vehicles electrically powered carrying about 200 kgs at a 15 km/h speed. The crown, which I won't have too much time to elaborate, is to be understood in the context of the city center, where beyond the crown into the center, it is a park. Most cities are congested and they become in the city center and they become less dense towards the periphery. Auroville is the opposite. The city center is peace, calm, and space for reflection and for cohesive, for the for the cohesive force that is required to define the collective life of Auroville and allow the central area of common ground to radiate on all the sides. And therefore, the crown is the spine of pedestrian collective life. So instead of having a busy center, the crown, it's like a longer length has been achieved so that all the facilities can be located halfway between the city center and the periphery. Regarding compact city versus sprawl, also that was known before. Roger had written, we must also avoid the pitfall of a cold, deserted city because of an excess of separating spaces. This is a comment to zoning. Not to build a too scattered city is indeed of capital importance. What we have to ponder upon and solve is the difficult problem of urban agglomeration to avoid the pitfall of the dormitory cities of known new towns and the sprawling of the individual in American housing. So the mother had underlined to avoid the pitfall and marked the last two lines and wrote in the margin, very important, the sprawling of the individual. The need for precise regulations. Many people also feel that in Auroville, you can do whatever you want and express your personal dream, continue the tradition of building ad hoc that we had to do in the very beginning period, perhaps. But, in fact, for Auroville, precise regulations, even more precise than other towns, were foreseen. The plan of each section will have to radiate its own atmosphere, sometimes even evoking a certain free reign of fantasy, recreating the freedom of ancient urban settlements before the disease of ill-understood urbanism imposed its laws. Roger wanted to avoid too many bad guidelines that do not protect cities. So he didn't want that kind of building codes, but much more sensitive ones, which will be in collaboration with architects. As time goes on, the architecture of Auroville ought to be controlled by precise regulations, defining, besides the general layout, also a palette of colors, of fences and materials, its maintenance, etc., to be monitored by a responsible service of Auroville. This is to prevent an unavoidable laissez-aller in the future. The mother marked in the second part of this paragraph and wrote in the margin, this provision is indispensable. Yet they conceived of a diversity of housing typologies. Anyhow, the best solution would be to come up with a large spectrum of types of accommodations as well as buildings interconnected in series with patios, terraces, etc. Only such a mixture can allow a play of volumes that is not monotonous. The mother had said, very good. I'm in favor of some diversity in the types of accommodations according to the residence typology. So there are systematic typologies planned out and laid and distributed across the city plan in a planned manner. So lean the force, these high concentrations of tall buildings were restricted to in order to allow this diversity of different typologies, housing typologies. These kind of structures were as balancing elements so that top down, like how to say, there could be enough of high rise and high tech housing that accommodates the density, but not everyone has to live like that. So that the rest of the city can be fairly low density, walkable without elevators. So I'm not going to go into the guidelines, but there have been many guidelines we prepared based on how these buildings were conceived. Even for sustainability, those who feel that the planned approach may compromise sustainability issues, we all know for India that in order to be sustainable, first and foremost, we have to have compact cities, and we cannot justify few people spread over many acres as a sustainable approach, regardless of if our walls are made of mud or if our food is organic. The whole thing has to begin with land use, and the sustainability and containing begins in India with the containing of the human footprint to a very small area. Therefore, the green belt is as large as it is and the city as compact as it is. Also, we have to avoid the socio-economic inequity that you see everywhere. In Auroville's plan, all of this is considered, and also the fact that Auroville is going to coexist with growing other poles of development in the 5 villages that we share space with. And so we will talk, there won't be any time for that, but at a later session, we have to talk about those kind of issues that I have not actually gone into in today's presentation. Also, the energy being renewable was planned from day one. Solar and wind were considered from the beginning to be self-sustaining in using the sun's energy, tapping it, etc., was always considered. Regarding water, I'm going to skip this because will be running out of time. I want to just explain that yes, the water was also planned to collect water for the city, was seen as the biggest challenge. The green belt, primarily zone agricole, it was meant for agriculture, for growing food for the city, and not only to fill up with forests and wilderness. It had to have a productive role. We will not be able to go into that today. I will now just mention something about the participatory approach. This is something like a bit difficult for me to discuss, perhaps in the context of Auroville, but I have often wondered if the mother had considered participatory design or only participatory building, because she valued the architect's role. She wanted to have a chief architect. She did not, we all know what she achieved and how meticulously she wanted the architect to make all decisions to set a very high design standard already when she envisioned Golconda and brought in Antonin Raymond all the way from Japan to produce this kind of building for her sadhaks. Similarly, Roger had also spoken about that in 1968, that there was no intention to build arbitrarily. And there was a 30 square meter per person definition and so many other things that have put the focus on collective living in Auroville throughout, rather than on the individual. And also I found that the mother, in fact, I found no instance of design consultation with Auroville residents during the time where Roger and the mother worked while she was still there. These plans used to not be shown for residents' feedback and so on. In fact, on the contrary, I found there was a message to the architects and engineers that they are not here to discuss the project. You're here to build the city. I know it's kind of probably difficult to bring this kind of discussion up in such a forum, but I'm sharing with you the questions I used to have when I lived in Auroville and saw contradictions between what I thought was envisaged and what was actually happening. So also, the mother talked a lot about wanting to build the city first and then to see things afterwards. She created Auro model for the people to live so that the virgin land will not be ruined by everybody's personal agenda. So anyway, this is to recall. I just want to show you a few glimpses now so that for those of you who don't know my involvement, I would like to share that I came in 1990. I worked with Roger from right in the beginning. You see Anbu, who's now in TDC. We used to all work together with Roger and Jacqueline. This is in 1996. Later, you see there is also Sonali, Louis Cohen. We are working on the line of force already when my office moved from Bharat Niwas to Aurelec. And I was also part of the team who produced the Perspective Plan 2025. It was in 1999 that we did it. But the Perspective Plan has only defined land use. We were much more advanced than what we showed in the Perspective Plan. And we did it because in the series of legal documents, Perspective Plan is the first step. And there we only defined land use and some other densities, etc. And we did only that much, although way more was defined. I continued working with Roger until he passed away in 2008 in France, as well as in Auroville, where I used to shuttle. He gave me more and more responsibility. Here we are working on the city center. I also authored his monograph 2009, just a year after he passed away, although we had worked on the book already together, because I felt knowing more about Roger process and work would really benefit all of us. I strongly recommend that we try to understand who has designed our city, and we will be very fascinated at the vision that he has brought down. I'm writing a second book, which I hope to release shortly, on Roger Anger's visions for urbanism. I had produced the city center plans while Roger was still there under his guidance, and we had started various things. Helmut had brought this kind of a sketch from Billinger about the mobility, but also we have checked with other people like Jan Gale, how much is how much is walkable, etc. And we had produced a city plan. I would like to particularly draw your attention to the dark green areas. There is while you try to right now the crown topic is hot. I want to say, please look at the crown topic alongside the green network of bicycle paths that are planned for Auroville. Each and every place can be arrived at walking and through cycles. The kind of thing that Paul had drawn, the meandering way with skate parks, etc. It's a parallel development inside the city center, just like a smaller inner crown, you can call it. It's a green network space. I think we should be beginning this since 2002. I'm hoping for it. There's no reason why we are not developing it. Hopefully you will do it along with the crown. But also, even though it's a pedestrian city, there was a complex hierarchy of buildings, of streets, their definitions, their characters, what can go in, what can't go in, what are the timings for service deliveries, etc. What are the paved spaces and the hubs within each and every zone. There's a lot of work done. How are the gardens maintained? Who manages? How much can the inhabitants do? What should the city manage? So parks and gardens are also defined, and the quality of circulation, the bicycle paths I spoke about, ready to realize. There's a toy train conceived for the cultural zone for the children to go to school after the crown, where adults are not encouraged to enter there. So, all this has been conceived in great detail. Also the densities and space calculations. One interesting thing I can share with you is that the vocational training center, because we are not developing in a planned manner, there are some zones we have not even begun, such as the vocational training zone for our youth. It is a topic to take up now that has been also planned with some amount of residences. I hope this is a very timely moment to begin developing very important facilities for the youth so that they will retain the interest to live in Auroville, and whatever they find falling short can be provided here. There's so much space reserved for them and for us to interact with them. Okay, so some more images to show you the detailed amount of work done and all the things that were calculated, what type of gardens were planned in the habitat areas. Even some buildings were detailed, such as the town hall, the main town hall that has not yet been built. That was also detailed and designed in great detail. So there's a lot of work that happened, including a couple of lines of force. This is the lowest density line of force that we had taken up near the solar kitchen, and how it interacts with the low density structures, and what kind of horizontal circulations will be enabled, what kind of neighborhood it can create, and how inspirations from Venice and other pedestrian cities like Bologna were taken to understand how the crown could be. There is no time for me in today's presentation to talk about the crown, but there's a lot of studies that were done, and a lot of what you would like to have are actually already contained in the plan. I think I really look forward to the outcome of the rest of the Dreamweaving workshop. But yeah, there are a lot of old cities like Jaisalmer, old Ahmedabad, old Delhi, where some of those same principles of urban design have been also tested. Like European cities that are now going, shunning the car and going for bicycles. And even in India, pedestrian ways are being separated inside green corridors. These kind of things can be so much better if we don't first build the problem and then have to fix it. If we directly build a totally new situation, then the pedestrian life will be central to Auroville. It will not be added somehow inside a car life. Okay, and bicycles don't have to only cycle along roads, and also the people who jog don't have to go there if we develop the green network. So a couple of glimpses of the line of goodwill that we've been working on since many years, but more concretely since 2017, when a group of people realized that we do need an urgent plan to manage the visitors who come to Auroville. This is the area where visitors center is located at the bottom. And this one development, 800-meter long, if you put in an 800-meter long infrastructure, you don't need to cut any trees much. You don't have to. If you build only this one line of 800 meters, you will be able to accommodate 8,000 people from ground floor up until 18 stories, but also manage the visitors' traffic to Matri Mandir and all the facilities, including public transport. So Roger had given us a lot of inspiration for that, and we did lots of work over the years to understand the massing. I have also consulted with Jan Gale, who many architects here know. He came to our guest critic when we worked on this project in Stuttgart, where I was a guest professor, and then at Yale University, where I was a guest professor in 2020. And recently, I produced a new model for the line of goodwill, integrating it with the low-rise developments to explain how the base of 3 or 4 stories could work to not have an abrupt tower sitting in the middle of low-rise, like in most cities. There are so many interesting pathways planned and cycle paths which of this kind of nature that are supposed to cross the line of goodwill. And the crown pedestrian pathway, to some extent, sometimes be also on the first floor, like the High Line in New York. So, these are studies that I've been doing. I'm just giving you a glimpse of it, so that when you will give me maybe some time in the future, I will be able to explain each of these projects. This is a 1:50 scale, 18-meter long model of the line of goodwill that we recently built and exhibited in Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, where this room was called Co-Creation, talking about collaboration with previous generations and future generations. That's why the housing projects are mostly built by my students from Yale University, KADK Denmark, and Fachhochschule Potsdam, where I now teach. And in the background, you will see, we have explained how it will work on the ground level in the context of Matri Mandir, and also what 1:1 scale, what the new facade could look like of this kind of building. Most important is the human scale is retained. When you go inside these spaces, they look very humane. They don't look like towers. That's the most important thing. And all the green technologies are incorporated in the ideas for the facade. The pink one is a power generating paint. There are solar cells, recycled denim, urban farming, and all sorts of things incorporated. For the phasing, if we build the city center, the residential sector 1 and 2, which is detailed, and the line of goodwill, we will reach 20,000 population without developing any other area, just concentrating on the parts I have highlighted. We would have 20,000 people, and this is what we suggest in the first phase, along with the green network, which should be done straight away, the whole green network. I'll just conclude. Let's avoid that. And I want to explain that organic growth will enhance our individuality and differences, and planned approach will enhance our collective life and unity. And the city is our common ground. I would like to conclude with the message that Auroville is an ambitious project, and let's make her ambition our ambition. Let's honor the promises made and agreements, and remember that the best way to predict the future is to design it. I would like to end also with this last slide saying that let's take the urban design of Auroville further, because first of all, because this is what was envisioned. Secondly, because this is what we promised. And thirdly, because it remains relevant for the future and is an inspirational example of integrated planning with a high standard of design. The proof of this relevance is through the numbers of people that it has attracted over the years, and the steady donors who continue to support Auroville to manifest. Thank you very much.
My question is that you spoke about those who are interested in sustainability. I am interested in that as an architect. I think that's also the need of the hour. Why has you know that the geology of Auroville, the topography is like a ridge, and there are 3 main watersheds that it comprised. Why has that, you have worked on it so long, have you tried to incorporate that into the design? And the waterways, you didn't have much time to speak on that, but the way the water will flow, because rainwater is the main source, have you been able to somehow incorporate that? Or have you thought about that?
So yes, first and foremost, it began with identifying that water is going to be a big problem already in 65. And it was always, water harvesting was always targeted. But for up until, I think it was in 2002, when we completed Asia Urbs, we did not have detailed surveys. We knew through Auroville's banding experience, and we, based on that book called Dying Wisdom, in fact, we should bring Raman into this forum because he knows about all the watersheds. The local people knew about the way the water catchment worked in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is a place where there's a very good legacy for water harvesting in all its various tanks. So most of the soil erosion, most of the other ditches that happened on account of soil erosion that was not being prevented in lands that were acquired. When Auroville began, the catchment areas and the Irumbai Lake and the Quilapalem catchment area were the principal ones. I don't want to make it lengthy, but after we got this detailed data, we had Harald Kraft working on the whole plan for the city, including water levels for every plinth, water drainage of the city. And there was a detailed plan made. And a lot of people who are worrying about, the water catchment areas, first of all, for small ditches, you can always have a sluice, that is easy to solve. The other way to solve is some of the ditches or ravines. Not all of them are canyons that we call canyons, frankly. There are water erosion gaps. So these have to be allowed. And yes, this has been permitted. There are many bridges and there are many, you see the first city center plan, the Galaxy model, it's full of waterways. There is an interlinkage of waters that flow throughout the city. And it's very important on a city level we cannot just, we have to have a planned management of water, not just give too much importance to the way out of erosion continuously water is being collected randomly where it falls due to other people not taking care of water runoff. In the future city, there will be no runoff of water that is not managed.
There are few things that I feel like, especially for the Dreamweaving team, I feel like needing to comment. First of all, I fully agree with the need of compactness, and I think there is almost an agreement today between planners that compactness is of highest value and urban fabric. I think I just have to register my disagreement of any comparison between Auroville and a city like Chandigarh or Brasilia, because they belong to completely different eras. One belongs to the modernist era, where another one is late modernism, coming closer to a different era. So this is the modernist era. Was all the focus were mostly on vehicular movement and full separation between passages for cars and buildings. And then we started criticizing this by going to an urban fabric. So they don't belong to the same time to see them in this way. But interestingly, we are turning back in a way, because while the original model of Auroville was all about the compactness and the fabric, we are now more focused on streets and roads. And then somehow we are actually making something almost against what was intentionally planned. And now the issue of, and this is I think very important to those who are working on the Dreamweaving, because the issue of the mass model, is it conceptual or not? Please, if we bring the mass model again, I can have some questions. Where are the edges between one plot and another, or one module and another, what are the function of each one of them. Everyone will have a different steward, everyone will have a different function. The building has to take shape in relation to its function. So it's very difficult to see this as a finished or detailed work. Where are the uses, the function, the question about the water, the canyons? We have seen in the previous presentation how complex the water situation is, and how can we see a plan without the canyon. The sun on the crown is changing all the time because you have east, west, north, south, how we are reacting to this. And I think this is part of the grounding and the work of the dream weaving. The air, the spinning of the air coming from all the galaxy, of all the lines of forces, they are coming in different directions in the crown, very difficult how to deal with all of this, and finally all the systems, how the systems connect. So I think the danger of feeling that this is a finished work is to go and make roads before all of these studies. And maybe the job of the dream weaving team is to go through all of these layers and study them. Yeah. Thank you.
May I just add to that, Omar? One of the things I would like to say, because I have not presented much about the crown, the thing is that maybe there is a fear about the crown road because of the way the crown has been executed up to now. It is not exactly how it was conceived, you know, like the way when the solar kitchen happened, and Arca and the Unity Pavilion and Savitri Bhavan, etc. You know, these buildings are, if we really understand the crown as it was envisaged in the galaxy, there is a horizontal circle, like there's a ring-like pedestrian circulation between the buildings, interconnecting the buildings, you know, like for example, from Unity Pavilion to Savitri Bhavan, there would have been an internal street, which is not on the road or not on the crown road, but inside the buildings. The buildings would have to necessarily touch each other. So like the crown road, it's a street where there is continuous development. But in Auroville, it is being interpreted as if there are project holders, plots, and all that. So the buildings have faced the crown road as if that there is not also the secondary internal way, which is almost more important for the pedestrian. As a result, the exact road as it was built with that island over there in front of Solar Kitchen, it all recalls the conventional road and not the public transport narrow, you know, way, and the intimate walkways that are planned inside it. And I think, therefore, people are reading the future of Auroville based on what has been built so far, but it's not quite like how it was conceived. That's what I would like to add. It was not as if that the crown buildings happened as per Roger's, you know, wish for the crown, or sort of what he envisaged, you know. So I guess we are still not understanding his vision about the crown.